Zach Larson, Bayer Sustainable Systems Agronomist here, and today we're talking about planting depth for common cover crop species. If you're new to cover crops, between the planting rates and the planting depths, it can seem daunting at first, but if you break things down into a few simple categories, you'll find that it's rather easy to pick your planting depth. For a seed to emerge, it needs to absorb 2 to 3 times its weight in water. So we need to get down to enough moisture to get our larger seeds emerged, because they'll need more water than our smaller seeds. Yet we don't want to have our smaller seeds so deep that there's just not enough in the hypocaudal or the coleoptile to get up out of that soil into the soil surface. One of the rules of thumb I've learned over the years is to plant seeds at about 5 times the smallest dimension of the seed. So in the case of round seeds, that's just about any dimension, but for our grass seeds, we want to plant on the small dimension, not the long ways. So I kind of wanted to test this, so I got my calipers out, and I measured a lot of these seeds and kind of compared them against that rule of thumb, and also just the general recommendations that are out there. So let's take a look. So if we look at our small seeds, and these would be our brassicas, so our rapeseed, turnips, cabbages, radish, our clovers, and then things like our annual ryegrass. Probably the biggest seed in here is radish. If we measure those out, they're all somewhere in the range of 50 thousandths to 100 thousandths of an inch. So following that rule of thumb, our planting depth should be somewhere in the 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch range. Now if we go to a slightly larger size, so this is things like our sun hemp, our buckwheat, sorghum Sudan grass, got some vetch there. These are slightly bigger. A lot of these seeds are probably falling into the 100 thousandths to 150 thousandths range. So we can kind of see that difference between sort of a medium and a small seed. For most of these, that's going to put us somewhere in that 1/2 inch up to an inch range for sort of our medium-sized seeds. Then we look at our large seeds. So this is going to be things like our cowpea, our sunflower, and you can see the kind of the narrow dimensions there on our sunflower, our winter pea. All those generally going to be in that 150 thousandths to 200 thousandths of an inch range. And I even threw in a larger seed here. So here's a faba bean, and faba bean somewhere around 300 thousandths of an inch. So most of these is going to put us in a planting depth of 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And with the faba bean being slightly deeper, you're probably going to put these more towards 1 to 2 inches for something like that. And then finally, small grains, and maybe they're a bit of an exception to the rule. If we measure across the small side of our small grains, so that'd be our oats, our wheat, rye, triticale, barley. Most of those are going to be 180 thousandths or so. So that's kind of similar to what we have with our medium-sized seeds. So we still should be somewhere in that inch range. So this is maybe a little bit deeper than that 5 times the diameter rule of thumb. And why that is likely is that a lot of our small grains have a pretty long coleoptile. So that's the sheath that holds that first leaf that pokes out of the ground. For our wheat, it's typically 2 to 3 inches. So if we're planting these up to 1.5 inches to get to good moisture, you're going to find that these will emerge just fine. So if anything, the small grains are a little bit deeper, or can be a little bit deeper than that 5-time rule, but you can certainly still get them as shallow as 3/4 of an inch. Now, the other issue that we might have to occur is what happens when we want to plant our small seeds with our larger seeds. And there's a couple ways that you might be able to do that. If you have a drill, the small seeds could go into a small seed box, keeping your larger seeds in the standard box. So with these, we might be able to drop these, basically on the ground at the end of the row unit. If you can't do that, another way to do this is to plant your depth closer to that of your larger seeds. So if we have one box and our small and our large are mixed together, we want to favor the large. And one of the thoughts behind that is that as these larger seeds start to emerge, that they're going to be just kind of splitting that seed slot apart just a little bit. And by opening up that seed slot just a little bit, it gives some room for these smaller seeds to start to push through. Another thing to think about for those that are not using a drill but doing more of a broadcast and an incorporate is making sure that you have your tillage tools or your incorporation tool set fairly light on depth. Like I said, most of these we have less than an inch for many of these seeds, even down to a 1/4 inch or less. So we want to make sure that we're not working that incorporation tool too deep. So if you have something like a harrow, like a Phillips harrow or a vertical tillage tool, make sure we keep our working depth light. And if you are having a seeding unit incorporated on that tillage tool, make sure that you're dropping the seed towards the end of the unit. So in the case of small seeds, we definitely want to make sure we're dropping them towards like the rolling basket or whatever your last implement is on that combination tool. So sort of keeping them to the end so we're not doing too much mixing rather than just placing that seed right there on the surface or maybe just a little bit into the ground. So I hope you can see with just a few kind of basic rules and a few categories, you can see that you don't have too many planting depths you really need to worry about. If you're able to break apart your seed and see those relative sizes and where they need to go, it keeps things fairly simple. So for those trying cover crops this year or trying some different species, just make a quick check and know what you're planting, and best of luck heading into this fall.